Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this Thursday, June 5th edition, 2014. I'm David Knight. I'll be your host today. We've got a lot of information, and we're going to be taking your calls as well. Today, we're going to be talking about Obama. Many people on both the left and right are talking about how he is becoming more and more like Nixon. I would say he's getting his Nixon on. Both commentators from the left and the right, how he's essentially doing what Nixon always wanted to do. Remember that quote from Nixon in the David Frost interview where he says, if the president does it, it's not illegal. You know, that type of thing. That's what we're hearing from the Obama administration now. I think that's what we really need to focus on this Bergdahl case. We've seen these types of actions time and time again, but as Jonathan Turley has pointed out, and he's I believe it's Harvard. It's one of the liberal institutions. Is it Harvard, guys? Anyway, Jonathan Turley has been pointing out on CNN, on Sean Hannity, very clearly the law states that he has to give 30-day notice in advance, not 3 days afterwards. Does he talk to the Congress? Not 3 days before, 30 days before, not 30 minutes after, 30 days before. It's a very clear violation of the law. As we have seen time and again, as we have seen with the actions of the NDAA, which ironically is the clause that has that 30-day provision in it. So essentially, Obama has been kind of hoisted by his own petard. Maybe he shouldn't have signed that NDAA act. I certainly don't think he should have. But we're also going to be talking about David Letterman. He had Anderson Cooper on his show, and desperate as he was to get attention and ratings as he's sinking into irrelevancy, they decided they would talk about gun control and basically rehash all of the old liberal talking points. So we're going to talk about that in light of the killing in California. And you know what's really behind it? It's really, guess what? Drugs. Where else do you think people are going to stop acting like animals like that? How do they lose their empathy and sympathy for other humans to be able to kill in that manner? It doesn't matter whether it's a gun or whether it's knives that he used on people. The issue is, how does one transform from being a human being to someone who will just lash out like that? And time again, we see it is the drugs, the SSRI drugs. In this case, it's a Xanax addiction to prescription drugs. That is what is making people crazy. But we don't want to talk about that. We can have a massive war on drugs, on recreational drugs, but we don't even want to mention the dangerous side effects to the pharmaceutical companies because, you know, hey, those are the sponsors of television. Virtually all of television is sponsored now in a way that it has never before been sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. 10, 20 years ago, you never had every other commercial be a pharmaceutical commercial with a long, long list of side effects. Well, this is one side effect we need to be talking about. So we're going to talk about that. We see that the European central banks are now floating the idea of a negative interest rate. That's right. Let's borrow our way into prosperity. And actually, we have an article up on Infowars where we've got somebody actually suggesting that that's been the motive behind much of the motivation behind much of the things happening in our economy, telling people they can live the good life. You can go from working hard to playing hard if you just go into debt. That's essentially what this guy says. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But all this week, we've been talking about the freedom of the press. We've been talking about how easy it is for government to work with media and to run down the memory hole things like the Bilderberg Group meeting secretly for decades, to run down the memory hole things like Tiananmen Square 25 years ago, to essentially pretend that it didn't exist and make an entire generation of Chinese ignorant about what happened on that day. We've seen that they've been able to run down the memory hole NSA whistleblowers like Benny and Drake. But a year ago, we had leaks from Snowden, and we're going to talk about the effect that that's had, what people have learned about that, and how finally that has taken out of the memory hole the dirty, hidden secrets of the NSA. So join us, and we're going to be taking your phone calls at 1-800-259-9231. Welcome to the Thursday, June 5th edition of the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. I'll be your host today. June 5th, it was just 1 year ago that we saw the first of the Ed Snowden leaks come out. You know, prior to that, even though we had been talking about it for a very long time, even though we had had very high-ranking NSA whistleblowers, people like William Binney and Drake, who had come out and warned us what was happening in the wake of 2001 readjustment of the entire NSA structure to essentially take spying that they had been doing abroad and essentially turn that agency inward on the American people in a dragnet surveillance. They warned us about it, but essentially it went down the memory hole, just like the press's coverage of Bilderberg for generations, just like the coverage of Tiananmen Square was ignored, and the Chinese media, the Chinese government, the Chinese textbooks pretended that that never happened. Well, we had a press that was essentially pretending that the NSA whistleblowers and what they were talking about essentially wasn't happening, even though William Binney was the highest-ranking technical person with global responsibility, and he blew the whistle on what was happening with this. It was a tale of insider corruption, paying a lot more for software that had been developed. They had software that he had developed, that he had been a part of, that was developed internally in the NSA, and it was able to do the job without violating the Fourth Amendment rights of innocent Americans, and yet they decided that they would go with a contractor. And I don't know what that was, but they would go with a contractor who would essentially charge a great deal of money and do a dragnet surveillance. So they went from one that was called, I think, Thin Thread, was developed internally by Binney and others. They went to Trailblazer. And they were blowing the whistle, but nobody was listening to them. Fortunately, when the Snowden documents came out, it's almost now become a passé meme within the last year. It's hard to believe that it's only been a year. There's been so much information that has leaked out about these leaks. So we're going to be talking about that and talking about the fact that there is more than one way to destroy our personal freedoms, our freedom of speech, and what's going on with the Internet. And the Internet is under attack from a variety of different angles. We're going to be talking about net neutrality, a great comment there were comments that flooded the FCC from a video from John Oliver, and that's what we need to see. We need to see people from both the left and the right who have serious disagreements on many things, but we have to come together to agree that we're not going to live under a police state. Yet we see with people like David Letterman and Anderson Cooper from CNN, as they got together on the David Letterman show, they started pushing this left-right paradigm, trying to use the Elliot Rodgers murders as an excuse for gun confiscation from innocent, law-abiding, responsible gun owners. And here's what they had to say, a little bit of it.
To improve, not eliminate guns, how to improve this. But now we've just become inured to this. People are shot and killed each and every day by private handgun ownership. You can't tell me this is an insoluble problem.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, at this point, it seems a problem that America isn't ready to tackle or isn't willing to tackle. I mean, I think
people are shot and killed every day by people having private handguns. Well, you know, people are shot and killed every day in this country by police who are operating under rules of engagement that should never have taken place. They're being prompted by the federal government to shoot first. That's actually the curriculum that they have in New Mexico, the State Police Academy. They had a long-time veteran instructor there who refused to teach that, who resigned rather than teaching that. But those are the rules of engagement that we see being pushed by a government. Do we want that government to have a monopoly on force? Do we want to take guns out of the hands of individuals who are behaving responsibly? And they completely ignore, in this discussion that David Letterman has with Anderson Cooper, they completely ignore the root cause. As we have pointed out before, in every one of these mass murder cases, it is always mood-altering, mind-altering, behavior-altering drugs. And in this case, in Elliot Rodgers, we now know that he had an addiction to Xanax. What can make someone lose all empathy, all sympathy for other human beings? What can make them get into a trance-like state where they can run over people on the road and not be bothered by it? They can operate and yet completely have any sense of what they're doing, any moral right or wrong, completely severed. Well, it's these drugs. Nobody's going to talk about it. Why? because the big sponsors for David Letterman's show, as well as the rest of the mainstream media, are these pharmaceutical companies. We have an entire war on drugs, which is turning our government into a predator, SWAT teaming people, shooting them without warning, no-knock raids, militarized police departments. We can have that in the name of a war on illegal drugs, but we can't even talk about the murderous side effects of the pharmaceutical drugs. That was when they cut Alex Jones off immediately when he went on to Piers Morgan. He could say pretty much anything he wanted to about Piers Morgan and guns, but when he got onto the murder-suicide pills, they basically did not bring him back in the next segment. Why? Because that's where they get most of their money. Now, I want to move on from that to the other big story that's breaking today. Of course, everyone is talking about Bo Bergdahl and this prisoner exchange. There's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot to talk about in terms of releasing these people, but I think the key thing we need to focus on, and what we see people on both the left and the right talking about, is the comparisons to Nixon and how he has an imperial presidency. He believes that he can do anything he wants. And we now see some people floating the idea of impeachment. Essentially, nobody, even the Democrats, are not backing up Obama for the most part. He's starting to get some of his administration people to back him up. But even, and of course Harry Reid backs him up, says, no, he doesn't have a 30-day requirement. It's clearly written in the law that he has to give a 30-day notice about this. It has to be talked about, discussed. He did not follow that. Jonathan Turley and others have pointed out that he clearly broke the law. There is no wiggle room on that. And now the question is, are they going to do anything about it? But let's look at some of the apologists first. We've got a clip from Hagel. Let's listen to what he had to say.
There's a lot of classified information in how we got him out, when we got him out, methods used. These are important classified documents. Now, we're sharing these things, by the way, in classified forums. With appropriate committees. To your bigger question, why now? It was our judgment, based on the information that we had, that his life, his health were in peril. And
imminently?
Well, when you say imminently, it's easy for us to sit here and look behind and say, well, 24 hours, 48 hours. It was our judgment, and it was unanimous, by the way, I might add. It was the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Director of National Intelligence, Attorney General. We all came to the same conclusion.
You know what? We hear this over and over again. Well, you know, you really just have to trust us on this because this is national security. I would like to tell you really what the basis of this is, but I can't really. Remember when we had the confirmation hearings for the judge that that is one level below the Supreme Court, a lifetime judge appointment, and yet this guy had written memos that supposedly gave legal justification to the drone assassination program. But of course, in all these years, nobody was able to look at those legal memos. When Rand Paul and others started to make an issue out of that this guy had written secret memos to essentially assassinate American citizens abroad, justifying that presumably with some legal argument, they said, well, you're going to appoint him to a very high court position, a lifetime appointment. Let's see what this guy's legal arguments are. And they wouldn't even release it to the Senate for a while. Finally, they released it to the Senate. We still have not seen those justifications to the public. So we always see that they're going to pull the State Secret Act. That's something that goes all the way down whenever you go in and even talk to somebody at a local police station. Oh, I can't comment on that. That's, that's confidential. Nobody in government will tell us anything. The entire government is being run like a star chamber. And frankly, I'm sick of it. We need to stop this. And on this one-year anniversary of the Snowden documents, as people are debating, whether we see Newt Gingrich talking about, is Snowden a traitor? And we see a Democrat say, no, he's not necessarily a traitor. He's just a criminal that needs to go to jail. Look, he exposed criminal actions that are being taken by people in government. We need to stop having a star chamber government. It's just metastasizing. But this is the comment from Obama today. He said, we saw an opportunity and we seized it. I make no apologies for that. Well, when Jonathan Turley went on the Sean Hannity show, remember he was on CNN earlier this week talking to Wolf Blitzer, and Wolf Blitzer was kind of surprised when he said, well, did the president violate the law? And he said, clearly he did. There isn't any wiggle room with this 30-day requirement. This is the comment that Turley had on the Sean Hannity show. He said, what's emerging is an imperial presidency, an Uber presidency, as I've called it, where the president can act unilaterally. This is only the latest example of that. Absolutely. This is happening all the time, even with his own Obamacare regulations. He gets his system put in, and even that is constantly adjusted as if he is dictator-in-chief. Now, Turley goes on to say, people don't seem to understand that the separation of powers is not about the power of these branches. In other words, I don't really care fundamentally if the president is more powerful than the Supreme Court or the legislature. It's really, as he said, there to protect individual liberty. It's there to protect us from the concentration of power. And we need to remember that the divisions and the separations of power were not initially just between the branches of the federal government. There was also a separation of power between the federal government, the state governments, and the people. They feared concentration of power so much, and they feared that it would happen in the central branch so much, that they divided that power between the states and the people, and then within the central government, they divided it into three pieces. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk about Obama getting his Nixon on. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight on this Thursday, June 5th, 2014. 1 year after the first documents from Edward Snowden surfaced. What it told us was not just that we had one agency that was violating the law, but we have seen in the year that has passed, as people have come after Snowden as a criminal for exposing what the government was doing and that was criminal, as they have, instead of reforming government, instead of going after the people who are violating their oaths, they've gone after Ed Snowden. What we see is a government that embraces the secret surveillance state. We've seen how pervasive that is, how it goes from the top to the bottom of the government, as we see that every part of government, from the White House down to local police departments, don't believe that not only are they not accountable to anyone, but they don't have to even give us any information about what we're doing. To me, that is the core thing that we're seeing here. It's an arrogance against the people to say that they are not accountable to the Constitution and they are not accountable to the people. And we see that in what Obama is doing. He doesn't believe that he's accountable to the law, to the Constitution, to the people, to anything. And we now see people from both the left and the right who are criticizing him for this. And we have Jonathan Turley, who's on Sean Hannity. I was just reading that quote where he said, people don't seem to understand that the separation of powers is not about the power of these branches. It's there to protect individual liberty. It's there to protect us from the concentration of power. He says, you know, I've said it before, Barack Obama is really the president that Richard Nixon always wanted to be. You know, he's been allowed to act unilaterally in a way that we've been fighting for decades. See, when you separate power between the central government and the states and the people, as was the original design, as you separate power between these different branches in government, those are just merely tactics. The real target is individual liberty. That is the goal. And we can't have that when we've got a government that has nothing but contempt for the Constitution, for the rule of law. Now, on the right, George Will had an essay, and he pointed out that Richard Nixon famously said to David Frost, when the president does it, that means it's not illegal. Doesn't that sound like Barack Obama? Doesn't that sound like the presidency we have now? He goes on to analyze the way that Politico explained what was going on. Politico kind of played semantics with what happened. They said that Obama's assertive act defied Congress. And Will points out, defied Congress? I thought it defied the law. That's what they're doing from the Edward Snowden documents showing that the NSA and all these different government agencies are defying the law. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that was put in. Remember that was put in the wake of the Church Intelligence Committee hearings back in the 1970s, looking at the abuses of the CIA, trying to make sure that they did not become a predatory spy agency like East Germany spying on American citizens. So they created this FISA Act. And they said, we're going to allow you to do intelligence of people that you think may be enemies of the United States abroad, but you're not going to do that here domestically. And now that has become something of a star chamber court, where they can go in and without, they call the FISA court a court. It's not a court in any way, shape, or form. There is one single person, a political appointee, who sits there and hears one person from the government. It's not an adversarial relationship there. There's no transparency. There's no public knowledge of what's going on. And yet, as they have these secret hearings between one judge and one bureaucrat from the administration, they believe that these decisions that they come up with have the power to modify our Constitution. Those are simply head games they're playing with themselves. They're engaging in criminal actions, and we need to call them on it. And fortunately, we've seen that over and over again with these Snowden documents. People are starting to understand what's going on. The question is, will we do anything about it? The question is, will our legislative leaders do anything about Obama's criminal actions? Now, in a story up on Infowars today from Alexander Bolton on the Hill, we see that Lindsey Graham is warning that the Republicans might impeach Obama for what he's done, releasing these 5 Taliban prisoners from Gitmo without following the procedure. Do you think? This is kind of, how many times have we heard this before? We always see the Republicans come out and say, oh, this is really bad. You know, one more time, we're going to do something about it. How many times does he have to break the law before they do anything about it? Now, we're going to take your calls. I want to get your take on the Snowden events and what's happened in the last year. Call us on 800-259-9231. Give us your take on what's happened in the last year and what you think needs to be done. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I want to remind you that this half hour of the Alex Jones Show is brought to you by our sponsor, My Patriot Supply. As Alex has said repeatedly on this program, the globalists are moving up their end game, and America, as we know and love it, may someday soon be a thing of the past. But patriots everywhere are getting prepared, and they're doing it with one of my favorite companies, MyPatriotSupply.com. MyPatriotSupply.com offers high-quality survival gear and is the home of the Patriot Pantry line of emergency food storage. The food's delicious, easy to prepare, put together with GMO-free crops and storable for up to 25 years. And My Patriot Supply has developed space-saving and secure food storage bins, unlike flimsy plastic pails that you find almost anywhere else. Visit MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex today for special offers. That's MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex. The globalists are counting on you to be unprepared. Fight back. Get prepared at MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex today. As a matter of fact, you know, so many times we have to work to try to get reform in our government, whether that's truth in labeling about GMO, whether that's getting fluoride out of the water, or whether it's taking action to try to stop the NSA. And so we now have, on this one-year anniversary of the Ed Snowden documents being revealed, showing us what our government has been doing to us in secret, we now see that there is a movement afoot on the web. Let's show a little bit of a clip of that to essentially reset it, to essentially take the initiative ourselves to do something ourselves to try to take back our freedom. That's an important thing. We always need to work together collectively for our individual freedoms, but understand that there are things that we can do ourselves. And so they're trying to appeal, as Edward Snowden has, to individual developers saying, put some features into your app that are going to give some security to your users. Or if you're a user, take advantage of some of the features that are already there. You know, for a long time, there was an app out there going all the way back to the days of Echelon back in the 1990s. People knew that the government was collecting, people who were informed, who were following things, knew that the government was collecting information on American citizens. And so some people made some tools available like PGP. That was pretty good privacy. It was a personal encryption method that would allow you to encrypt your emails. We know that if everybody starts encrypting their emails, it's going to be very difficult for the NSA to do something about it. Of course, it's an ongoing war. They will adapt as we adapt, but at least let's resist. let's at least do something. Let's play a little bit of a clip for people on radio. We've been showing some video from their campaign. Let's play a little bit about it.
We use the internet to be ourselves, but governments are building a prison around it. We have to stop them, but how? They seem so vast and powerful. But government spies have a weakness. They can hack anybody, but they can't hack everybody. Folks like the NSA depend on collecting insecure data from tapped fiber. They depend on our mistakes. Mistakes we can fix. The plan? Reset the net. Together, on June 5th, 1 year after Snowden's first NSA story, we all take one powerful step to turn off government spying and turn on freedom. The call is simple. Find some territory of the internet that you can protect from prying eyes. Seize it and hold it. Are you a developer? Promise to add one NSA-resistant feature to your app. Are you an internet user? Promise to try one NSA-resistant privacy tool.
Okay, now that's the campaign. You can find that. It's a hashtag Reset the Net. It's a campaign, and their motto is, don't ask for privacy, take it back. I think we should do that with everything, whether it's our own personal food supply, our drinking water, our right to keep and bear arms. There's so many different things that we can do, especially, I would add, juries. We see trial by jury as well as even a trial by a judge is something that is starting to disappear from our country. So we need to take these things back as we can. We also need to work collectively to try to stop it. And I'm going to go to your calls here in just a moment, try to get your take on what Obama is doing as he becomes essentially the reincarnation of Richard Nixon. But I also want to talk to you about Snowden, where you think we could head with that. Besides resetting the net, what do we do to take this back? There's been a lot of ground covered in the last year about educating the public. That's a very positive thing. Now, what do we do to take action? I want to talk about how Meet the Press is debating the importance of Snowden. Now, we saw just this last couple of days, it was on June 1st on the Sunday show, they had Newt Gingrich and a Democrat, former congressperson, Harmon, talking about it. Listen to this quote from Gingrich. He said, "What right does any single American have to decide that more than the president, more than the Congress, that they're going to leak our secrets? This is the act of a traitor." What Snowden leaked were the traitorous acts of our president, of our Congress, of our NSA, of our bureaucracies. There was an article that broke when I was in Europe about the national health system in Britain. There was a whistleblower there that exposed the fact that in the areas that he was working, they had children and seniors who were locked away for 12 hours a day without any food or water. Now, the response of these people was it to thank him? Was it to put the people in jail that had been doing this, to fire them, to do anything to them? No. What they did was they fired the whistleblower. We see that happening over and over again. People who expose criminal activity on the part of the government are not criminals. That's what Ed Snowden did. Now, the Democrat, Harmon, said, well, you know, Snowden should come back. He should cut a deal. He should serve prison time. I think that's where this should come out. This ought to be a lesson to other kids. Watch out. This is very dangerous. Yes, it's very dangerous to expose the illegal actions, the criminal actions of a criminal government that will not reform itself. Now, one of the other pieces of fallout that's happening, of course, from Snowden is that American corporations are finding that it's much harder for them to do business. And in China, the Wall Street Journal just pointed out that Chinese state television ran a very anti-Microsoft segment. Now, of course, Microsoft was one of the early adopters of the PRISM program. They were the first ones in there. They were in there long before the other corporations got in there. They've been linked at the hip with the surveillance state, with the security state here in America. A Chinese state TV broadcast, they say on Wall Street Journal, laid into the Microsoft and its Windows 8 operating system on Wednesday, saying the amount of personal data the system's capable of collecting and the profile of Chinese society it would be capable of producing would, quote, be more precise and up-to-date than that collected by our own National Bureau of Statistics. They said, we've seen that the USA has relevant acts like the Patriot Act that oblige companies that hold information resources to transfer that to the U.S. government. That's the message that people are getting about our corporations. They need to distance themselves in a real way. People are not buying their phony misinformation saying that they really weren't part of the PRISM program. People don't buy that, and it's costing them dearly. And that's going to continue to go on until companies like Microsoft actually push back. But don't hold your breath. We see that even in places like Florida, small town sheriff departments, it's not just at the top where we see this kind of corruption. It's even down at the local police departments. And it's being driven by our federal government. They're the ones who are offering sweetheart deals on all this heavy equipment that is militarizing our police as if they were going to be fighting a war in Iraq or Afghanistan. And so we see this story about U.S. Marshals seizing cops' spying records to keep them from the ACLU. This is one that was picked up by the Drudge Reports from Wired Magazine. They say a routine request in Florida for public records regarding the use of surveillance tool known as Stingray, and we've reported on that several times here at Infowars, took an extraordinary turn recently when federal authorities seized the documents before the police could release them. Now, under a court order, they were going to be given these documents over to the ACLU, which was challenging it. Essentially what they're doing is they are tracking and surveilling people without a court order, without a warrant. In other words, the police departments, and many of these are local police departments, a lot of it is happening in Florida, they're illegally surveilling people without getting a search warrant. Now, to keep that information from being turned over, they point out, the ACLU points out that several times the feds have come in doing everything they can to prevent that information from being turned over. Let me tell you just a little bit about what Stingray is, okay? It's essentially a way for them to triangulate your position using cell phone data. And they're saying, well, because it's just your cell phone data, it's just metadata, and that doesn't really apply. That's baloney. That's meta lies. I'd say they're prevaricating around the bush. Listen, if they can profile everything about your personal habits using metadata, that's just as good as if they're going to actually read your email or if they're going to listen to you. And we know that they're doing that too. We know they're doing that. We've been telling you that they're doing that. Whistleblowers have been telling you that they're doing that. We know they're doing that. When they come in and say, we're only getting metadata, that's a lie. But if they were only getting metadata, if that were really true, that would be a violation. But here's the thing that really bothers me about this. The explanation from the Tallahassee Police Department said, even that, and this is the police department that, according to the Wall Street Journal article, said they'd used Stingray at least 200 times since 2010 without telling any judge. And here's their reason. The device manufacturer made the police department sign a non-disclosure agreement that the police claim prevents them from disclosing what they're going to do to the courts. Think about that. Think about that. They're saying that they signed a paper with a corporation that they're not going to disclose this information to a judge as required under the law, under the Constitution, that their non-disclosure agreement with this corporation is more important than the Constitution or any laws that we write subsequent to that. That's what they're saying. I mean, could it be any clearer that we have a corporate fascist surveillance state here, that a military industrial complex company, and that's their new profit center, is the police state, that they can come in and have a police department sign this paper saying, you can't tell a judge if you're going to actually be using this. And the police use that as an excuse? Those people ought to all go to jail. This is absolutely amazing that they would do something like this. Let's go to your phone calls. We've got Ashley in Wisconsin. Ashley, go ahead.
Hi, how's it going today?
Doing fine.
I actually saw an article in Vice News under War and Conflict section that I found very interesting. And the headline of it was, why was the FBI investigating Michael Hastings reporting on Bo Bergdahl? And I didn't know, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, that Michael Hastings actually did a report on Bo Bergdahl. And it's actually titled America's Hope, goodness, I just had, and
Yeah.
both figures glitching out. But it's very interesting that I did not know that Michael Hastings was actually reporting on Bo Bergdahl.
Oh, yeah, we're very aware of it. Yeah, our Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, he was the one that Michael Hastings was embedded with, and he knows quite a bit about the Bergdahl case. He had several reports about it. Actually, we've got a special report from the Nightly News last night that we're going to be running later on in the show from Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs.
Okay, so yeah, I thought that was very interesting. I was like, oh, I hope they know about that. That's a very interesting connection to the two. You know?
Yes.
But,
yes,
okay.
thank you for bringing that up. Yes, let's go to Brian in Arizona. Brian.
Yeah, hey, I just want to touch base on the 6 terrorists that got released. And my feeling of it all is that he had no idea who the hell the person was that he let go. If they did know, it's complete treason. And the only threat that we have to our country is the Obama administration. Most of all, Harry Reid keeps shutting everything down and blaming it on the Republicans, which the Republicans are spineless. You name it. We can go on and on about that.
Well, of course, we've known for a long time that they essentially created Al-Qaeda. They called them something else when they were fighting the Russians. They called them Mujahideen. But, you know, this is something that our government creates the threat, and then they offer the solution, whether it's 9/11, whether it's the Al-Qaeda terrorists. They create the boogeyman, and then they come to us with a solution that they've already developed. And so I think the biggest thing about this is that we need to stop tolerating this breaking of the law by the president. How many times does this have to go on before he's impeached?
How can we stop it? And they're not going to do it. They're going to throw the race card in there again.
Exactly.
Is there some general somewhere that can stop this? Is there anything? It's got to be we the people, and we got to stand up. We got to vote. We got to do what we can do to get this god-awful mess off the table.
Well, that's true. I think just like with the Snowden leaks, I mean, we can't go in and physically arrest NSA. We can't physically go in and shut them down. And as long as we have a government that wants to do this, there's not a great deal that we can do other than things like this, reset the web. We can do things to resist it on a personal level. We can get active and we can educate people about jury nullification. We can shut it down. It only takes one of us in a jury to shut down the war on drugs, which is really where this police state started a couple of decades ago. They've now rolled it into the war on terror, but one person sitting on a jury can shut this down. That's the beauty of the jury system. That's one of the most powerful things we have as a people. And so there are things that we can do to protect ourselves individually, to protect our family, and even to stand up for the rights of people who are on trial. But most people don't want to be bothered with a jury trial. And jury trials are so rare that most people will go in and take a plea bargain rather than trust their fellow jurors. So, yeah, I don't really know what we do. Thank you, Brian in Arizona. Let's go to Billy in California. Billy?
David, I wanted to start off by saying I agree with you guys on about 90% of everything that you guys cover, and I think that you guys do a great job. Having said that, I think I disagree with you guys on something that you guys are a big thing that you're missing. I think that you guys are missing a huge conspiracy, and the conspiracy is evolution. I mean, so many Christians out there still believe in evolution. They believe that the Earth is billions of years old and that, we evolved from monkeys. Basically saying that Genesis is completely not true.
Yeah, I don't believe that, frankly. I believe in special creation. I take the Bible literally, and I don't have any problem with defending that. The key message of the Bible is what Christ did for us. But, of course, when you start talking about creation versus evolution, what you're really talking about is, do we really believe the authority of the Bible? Are we going to go into science that is continually changing, and are we going to then try to read that back into the text in order to get the Bible to agree with whatever the science of the day says? I don't agree with that. I take it literally. I don't have a problem with that. If God can raise a man from the dead in 3 days, I think he can create the earth in any time that he wants to. So we're going to be right back. We're going to take some of your calls. We're all over the map, all different things. I would like to take some calls on Ed Snowden. What do you think about this last year? Let's talk about freedom of the press and freedom of the internet. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. We're talking about a variety of subjects today. We're talking about Obama's arrogance, about how he's channeling Richard Nixon. As Nixon said, if the president says it, it's not against the law. And that's essentially what we're seeing Obama. He thinks, you know, a dictator is essentially somebody who just speaks the law out of his mouth. And evidently, that's what Obama thinks. He's a dictator. He changes Obamacare as he wishes. He ignores the laws within the NDAA that he signed, and we have a lot of problems with what he signed, but whenever he violates it, the Republicans just let him get away with it. They try to make a few cheap points as far as with their base, as far as election purposes go, but essentially they think that they're going to get the reins of power, and they want all the power that he has. They're not about cutting back the power that the president has assumed or the power that the central government has assumed. They want that power in Washington. So we're taking your calls at 800-259-9231. This is also the one-year anniversary of the first leaks of Ed Snowden, exposing criminal activities by a criminal and secret government that believes that everyone, not just our president, but everyone in the bureaucracy, everyone in the Senate, everyone in the House of Representatives is essentially above the law. So I want to get your comments on that. Terry in Virginia, what do you think about Snowden?
Ed Snowden?
Yes, yes. What do you think about the Snowden leaks? What's your take on this, on the one-year anniversary?
Well, I have thought from the very beginning that Ed Snowden was a hero. From the very first time I heard about what he did, I never doubted that, you know, what he was doing was really for the United States people and not trying to be, you know, a traitor.
Right.
That's the word I was trying to think of.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I just have such a problem with people saying, oh, you know, I don't mind them spying on me because I don't have anything to hide. And my stepson said that to me just recently, and I said, well, how would you feel if there was a peeping Tom standing outside your window, even if he was dressed in a police uniform?
Yes.
And they're watching you. How would you feel about that?
Exactly.
Well, I'd go out there and I'd beat his butt, is what he said. And I said, well, it's no different. What's different about it?
Alex has used that analogy many times. He says, why do we even wear clothes? You know, shouldn't everything that we have be available to the government? If you understand human nature, you understand that giving somebody that kind of power is incredibly dangerous, and it will be abused. William Binney was a guest on our show. We interviewed him, and of course, he was one of the early NSA whistleblowers. He was involved as the global technical head. In other words, he was the head technical person at the NSA for quite a long time. He worked there for over 30 years. And he had global responsibilities. And what he told us on this program when I interviewed him, he said, I've seen this in East Germany. I've seen this in the Soviet Union. In the early days when he worked for the NSA, that's what they did. They spied on people that were perceived to be a threat to the U.S. government abroad. And he's very concerned when that surveillance apparatus, that spy machine, turns inward on the American people and starts surveilling the most minute details of their lives, compiling dossiers on every individual in the country. When you allow the government to do that, you will find that they will intimidate people, that they will shut down debate, and people will be intimidated just by knowing that the government is watching them. They will shut up and they won't do anything. So it's a very, very dangerous thing. The other thing that happens is you find that they can blackmail very high-level government officials. We've seen some very unusual things, some unusual behavior from Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts on Obamacare. Many people, even before the NSA leaks, believed that perhaps he was being blackmailed. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk about the Snowden leaks. We're also going to talk about European central banks going with negative interest rates. What is that about? Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we are here on Thursday, June 5th, 2014, the one-year anniversary of the first documents from Edward Snowden that I think have done a lot to wake up the American public. And the question is, though, are we going to do something about it, or are we going to just become adjusted to it? Is it going to become the new normal? Because now it's almost become passé to say that the government is watching us. When we were saying it, when Alex Jones was saying it for years, for decades, people would laugh at him as being a conspiracy theorist. We had whistleblowers from the NSA in the early 2000s, about 10 years before the Snowden leaks, telling us what was happening, that the surveillance state was moving from looking at possible terrorists and spies abroad to turning inward on the American people, compiling vast dossiers on people who were not suspected of any crime. What's that about? Let's take a look at one of the older reports that we had throughout this last year about Ed Snowden, and then we're going to take your calls at 800-259-9231. Let's go to that report. Well, Obama's defense of the NSA's constant surveillance of all Americans just reached a new level of absurdity when he compared them to Paul Revere. After blatantly lying, even they realize they don't have any credibility.
We're putting out mindless propaganda, is what some of us feel that we're putting out, and that what the American people feel that we're putting out.
What's a tyrant to do? Well, you could pull in some corporate billionaires who work hand in glove with the NSA. I'm sure that would help.
So it's not as though government surveillance is absolutely bad in all cases. Is it done in a way that people trust that the normal privacy concerns are being adhered to?
It's interesting that Gates would be talking about trust. Microsoft was the first company to partner with the NSA on violating your trust and spying on you without reason and without a warrant. Internet companies want you to trust them with your data, and the government wants you to give your data to a third party like Microsoft so they can get that data without a search warrant. They merely ask companies like Microsoft, and Microsoft eagerly turns over all of your information. But it's not just Gates with soothing words for the public. Mark Andreessen, Netscape founder, now venture capitalist, took to Twitter this week to defend the NSA. And government cheerleaders in the press were relieved that finally someone had the guts to defend the NSA. Andreessen tweeted, "I increasingly feel like we're on some gigantic collective fainting couch. Oh my word, I can't believe that spy agencies spy. In the U.S., we all collectively hired tens of thousands of our fellow citizens and gave them $75 billion a year with a mission to spy on our behalf." Do you notice the subtle lie here? It's not that the NSA is spying on our behalf, it's that they're spying on us illegally. He completely loses the context of FISA. The F stands for foreign, and it was created because we learned in the 70s during the Church Commission that spy agencies weren't just spying, they were engaged in all kinds of criminal activity as well. The purpose of FISA was to restrict the CIA and the NSA from spying domestically. But Andreessen tries to confuse the issue further by saying, to suddenly turn on them and blanket accuse them of comprehensive illegality and moral horrors is unfair to them, and it lets us off the hook. Is it unfair to accuse the NSA of comprehensive illegality when they lie to Congress, when they violate FISA and the Constitution and spy on all Americans without a search warrant? Andreessen has been trying to cover for the NSA from the very beginning of the Snowden leaks, trying to muddy the waters by claiming that the NSA critics are too stupid to understand the technology involved.
American citizens, as well as non-American citizens, direct access, no oversight, no court order, these very sweeping claims. And the thing that's been so frustrating from my perspective is this sort of issue of technology in our society and the internet in our society is a central issue. And to talk about it, people have to understand the technology. People have to actually be willing to understand the technology. And the original reporting simply did not understand the technology.
Andreessen saying critics simply don't understand technology couldn't be a bigger lie. Multiple NSA whistleblowers told us about illegal surveillance 12 years ago. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and here we are on the one-year anniversary of the Ed Snowden documents, the very first documents that were leaked. And, of course, there's been a steady stream of documents over the last year. It's now almost become passé for people to say, hey, the government's spying on us. Are we going to get adjusted to that? Are we going to accept that? Are we going to love our slavery? Or are we going to push back? Some people have a Reset the Net campaign, hashtag Reset the Net. It's resetthenet.org, trying to encourage people to take individual action, just as we encourage you to take individual action when it comes to water fluoridation or GMO in your food. There are certain things that you can do, but we also want to work together collectively to try to get individual liberty. And so I want to get your comments on this one-year anniversary of the beginning of the Snowden documents. Of course, They have promised, Glenn Greenwald has promised that he is going to, as kind of a grand finale, he's going to release a list of all the people that the NSA has been targeting. I'm going to be very disappointed if I'm not on that list. How about you? If we're not on that list, maybe we're not doing enough to speak out, to educate, to push back against this. They are spying on everybody, so why aren't we on that list? I want to take your comments. We've got Francis in North Carolina. You had a comment about Snowden. Go ahead.
Hi, David.
Hi.
One, when I first learned about Snowden doing this deal, I thought, you know, finally someone's actually showing they got testicle fortitude to actually present to the people what's really being done to them, and especially from the backside of the situation. So quite frankly, it's like, it's about bloody time.
Yes.
Of course, at that time when I made that comment to people, they thought I was absolutely out of my mind. I'd lost it, for that matter, and was basically a traitor. And quite frankly, the politicians, the alphabet soup agencies and all that, they are the actual traitors to start with.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Now, the sad part is that, mind you, when Obama actually went into a campaign to go into office, I figured he had to be better than the shrub or whoever was before him as far as his predecessor is concerned. So I'm making an obvious confession about this, is that the first time I actually campaigned to try to help him get elected, not realizing just how big of a screw deal he was. Because shortly after he got into office, everything went downhill. Now, what I'm trying to figure out is, just like with Bush Jr., how it is that people would go and vote well, actually, now I realize that people didn't really vote for him because the voting machines were rigged at that time. The fact that Obama got in the second time for a second term. So it's like, you know something, when you got voting machines that are riggable and all that, computer-wise or whatnot, or hacked into, it's really, you're cutting your own throat by allowing the corporations to go and do that to you, and people being on the illusion that their vote counts. If it did, then withdraw it, because they don't deserve it and never did.
Well, that's true. It's always a question, you know, do we participate in the system that is rigged from the very beginning? I mean, I was involved in third-party politics. I know that they cut off access to the debates. They cut off access to the ballots for most people. We don't have a multi-party elections in this country anymore. And then, of course, they control how the votes are counted. They control the custody of the votes. They control the totaling of the votes. They control the reporting of the votes. There are so many different places where they can essentially come in and corrupt it. So it's a very difficult system to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to participate in it or whether you're going to boycott it. I understand there's arguments for both sides. I mean, personally, I like to always get in there and fight something as opposed to just stepping back. It seems like stepping back is a passive thing to do, but I accept the other argument. I really believe, though, that where we're going to make headway is if we understand certain things like jury nullification. If you're one of 12 people, or in some cases 6 people, depending on what they do, you have a real opportunity to shut down a bad law or shut down a draconian application. Or maybe you fundamentally agree with it, but you don't agree with the penalties that are involved in it. But basically, we can, if we exercise those powers, and essentially jury trials are all but dead anymore. And we're now getting to the point where, as we've learned from some of these Snowden leaks, that we don't even have a court system anymore. There was just an article, I've got this right here on my desk. This came out earlier this week. Sealed court files, this is from the Wall Street Journal Online, sealed court files obscure a rise in electronic surveillance. And this is right here in Texas. This is a federal magistrate judge, Brian Owsley, who approved scores of government requests for electronic surveillance in connection with criminal investigations, and then he sealed them at the request of the government. He was bothered by that. So after he retired last year, he went back to unseal more than 100 of his secret orders. Now, these are things that were, along with the government's legal justification for the surveillance, these were not things like terrorism. These were things like bank robbery, drug trafficking. They were not state secrets, he said. A senior judge halted the effort with a one-paragraph order that offered no explanation for the decision. Now, this judge is saying that he thinks it's like something out of Kafka. He's very concerned about this, that we have such a secretive society. And I think that's one of the key things that's come out of the Snowden documents is for people to understand that the government is shutting off all transparency, all information about everything that they're doing. That is an incredibly, incredibly dangerous thing. And let me tell you where this is going to head. In The Guardian today, there was an article from Owen Jones, and he says, Britain's first secret trial. This is the way of trouble. This way lies trouble. And he says that they had two men who are known only as AB and CD. For people that have ever watched any of the kids' cartoons, it sounds like bananas in pajama, you know, B1 and B2. My kids used to see that when they were very young. He said they've been charged with terrorism, these two people, AB and CD. Journalists were forbidden from disclosing even that simple fact until newspapers overturned a gagging order. For the first time in centuries, in a direct challenge to the Magna Carta of 1215, the entire trial will be held in secrecy. Do you understand? This is where we're going. We are overturning hundreds of years of tradition that protects individual liberties. Star chambers, secret proceedings, people not being allowed to have a jury. This is where we're headed with this police state. They're surveilling people. They've already passed the NDAA where they can indefinitely detain people even without a trial. So they can either have a secret trial or they can have no trial at all. And he points out, this is a quote from somebody named Shami Chakrabarti. I don't know who that is. It's somebody from the UK. But he says, transparency isn't an optional luxury in the justice system. It's the key to ensuring fairness and protecting the rule of law. And then they can have a couple of examples. They say this same government that's now in power in the UK passed a Justice and Security Act just last year that instead of judges, they allowed ministers to be given power over evidence in court, risking the principle of a fair trial. And then it goes all the way back to Margaret Thatcher in 1986. She had a Public Order Act. What happened with that was they criminalized words or behavior that would cause harassment, alarm, or distress. And he points out, who would have thought when that was passed that it would eventually be used against a wide range of groups, all the way from gay rights activists to Christian street preachers? Just a Public Order Act saying that you can't use harassing speech or speech that's going to cause alarm or distress. Then they give one more example here that says, neither did proponents of the Terrorism Act suggest that the source of people on the receiving end would include an octogenarian refugee called Walter Wolfgang, who had fled the Nazis and had the temerity to hackle a minister. So he gets hit with the Anti-Terrorism Act. That's what we're seeing in America with the Patriot Act. That's what we're seeing with the FISA court, which is secretly holding these trials. And we were told that Obama was going to be the most transparent president we'd ever had. He campaigned on transparency. He has been a transparent fraud. He's been a transparent dictator. Many people on the left have the honesty to stand up and say that, to point that out. But many people, just as we see with Republicans, have more allegiance to their political party than they do to principle. And so that's why we see all these people lining up in lockstep behind him. So far, that hasn't really happened with the Bergdahl case. We'll see if that's something that's if they're going to change. So far, we've only seen Harry Reid go in and support him 100% on this. Everybody else has tried to distance themselves from him. Even Dianne Feinstein has said that he broke the law. Well, if he broke the law, when are we going to do something about it? I don't know. Let's go to the right to bear arms and FEMA region number 10.
David, exactly. That's what I was going to speak to with you about. We need to link up and watch what they do with Edward Snowden. I saw a link to the Drudge Report that said possibly he might make a trip back to the U.S. Also, with Bo Bergdahl, they're saying that he left. One of the first orders, even in basic training that you take, I'm prior military myself, is the order is, I will not quit my post until properly relieved. If you do that, you are a term that we have not seen thrown out there yet in the media, which is AWOL. AWOL is absent without leave. That is a punishable offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. This is something that has not been brought up as well. I think we need to watch both what they do with both of these people. Supposedly, both of them have leaked some kind of information to the enemy or given information to the enemy. and we need to see if there's any consistency on the how we deal with both of these heroes or traitors.
Well, you know, when you say that Snowden has leaked information to the enemy, you know, quite frankly, I don't think it came as news to any European spy agency that the American spy agency was doing what they're doing. I don't think it came as any news to any terrorists that the NSA was watching them. I think the only people that were surprised were the American public, who had no reason to suspect that their government was spying on them. We've reported it. Nobody believed us when we said it. Nobody paid any attention to the NSA whistleblowers like Benny and Drake and others. It was ignored by the mainstream media. They pretended that it didn't exist, just as they did Bilderberg, the same technique we saw the Chinese government use against Tiananmen Square. Ignore it, pretend it's not there, flush it down the memory hole. Fortunately, I think the most important thing about Snowden is that this is now out and in the public, and we understand who the real criminals are. Gentlemen. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. We've been taking calls and comments about the one-year anniversary of the Ed Snowden documents beginning to leak. What do you think is going to happen? What's your take on it? Is he a criminal? Did he betray state secrets? Or did he inform us of who the real criminals are? Did he get people to believe what Alex Jones and NSA whistleblowers have been telling people for more than 10 years in many cases? Alex has been talking about it longer than the NSA whistleblowers have. They blew the whistle back in the early 2000s. And about 10 years later, Snowden produced the documents. You know, we had a report in the very first segment of this hour going over Microsoft and what Mark Andreessen had said, basically cheering the NSA on. And, you know, we had information back in December that was leaked, another one of the Snowden documents, essentially showing Apple's involvement in this. And there were a series of slides that I found to be very disturbing in both their cynicism and their mockery of the American public. It was a series of 3 slides, and if you all remember, the Mac was introduced in 1984 with that award-winning commercial. It was shot by Ridley Scott. It aired on the Super Bowl just once. It's been seen many, many times, about the runner who runs up with the hammer and throws it into the Big Brother screen and explodes it. And they showed that, a single shot of that commercial, and they said, who would have thought that in 1984, then you get the next slide, and it says that this, and they show the iPhone, would become Big Brother. And then they show people lined up outside the Apple stores in order to get an iPhone, which is nothing but a surveillance device for the NSA. Now, that's the way the police state rolls out. That's the way the technological, technocratic takeover of our society rolls out. It rolls out with one hand to help you, and another one in your back pocket, another one spying on your most personal aspects. That's what we're seeing happening. Now, they pointed out that, of course, there was a piece of software, Dropout Jeep. It's very well known. The NSA uses that, and the Wall Street Journal said, Apple says it never worked with NSA to create a backdoor in the products, and yet either Apple is very technically incompetent or they were working with him. And that's the same thing you can say about all of these different companies, because, of course, it's kind of probably like a mobster type of thing. That's the way these guys work. They come in and say, well, you can either be a part of us and we'll promote you, we'll give you government contracts, we'll give you access, or we'll basically find some way to shut you down with some kind of a white glove inspection. That's the way they can shake these corporations down. They do it with small businesses, they do it with individuals, and of course they can do it with the biggest of the companies. I think it was interesting that Apple did not join the PRISM program until after Steve Jobs was gone. So I don't think that he was all that amenable to it, but I think that the people who've been left behind, who are essentially managers, not visionaries like Steve Jobs, don't really see that it's their lives that are on the line and not just ours. Because, you know, if they turn this over into a police state, they're the ones who are going to be under the microscope as well. It's always the people who are the leaders of a country, just as we saw in the coup in Thailand. We always see that it's the legislators, the people who are in power, that are the greatest threat to these people. They're the ones who are lined up and taken away first. So that's something for them to keep in mind. In just a couple of minutes that we got left, let's go quickly to Jason in Colorado. Jason, you had a comment about the Ed Snowden documents.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I'm just here to say that I actually think what he did was a good thing, as long as he's done it under the right reasonings. And I'm pretty sure that the government's going to make it twist into something that it's not. And on another thing that you were talking about as far as the internet is concerned, how is the best way to find out what sites and stuff you can actually still go to that isn't under government control or spying on us? I know yours isn't, and I love your site. I've only been here for like a month watching you guys, and I've done everything I can to help out with this system because I actually use what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you. You know, they're spying on everybody on the internet, and that's something people need to be aware of. That's what this Reset the Net campaign is about. If you're a developer, what can you do to give people tools that are going to, if not totally block this? Because when we had William Binney on, of course, he was the global technical director. He said there isn't anything you can do to stop it. But if everybody is doing that, that's the point in the Reset the Net campaign. If everybody is resisting them, that's a very effective strategy. Just as we see, if one person stands up and opposes the government in a protest, they're going to slam you down. We've seen that even in open carry rallies. When you got 1,000 people with guns slung over their shoulder, they leave everybody alone. Everybody leaves and you've got just one person left, they get hassled. We stand together collectively for our individual rights. In other words, to stand together or we're going to hang separately, as Benjamin Franklin pointed. It's always been that way. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. I'm your host today. We've been talking about the one-year anniversary of the Snowden documents, the beginning of the leaks. What do you think of it? What do you think of what the effect is going to be of that? And, of course, we're also talking about the release, the prisoner exchange that Obama did, where he illegally released 5 Gitmo detainees without following the 30-day procedure. That's a very, very clear violation of the law. Are we going to just say, do that one more time, and I'm going to get serious about enforcing the law? I'm going to maybe impeach you, as Miss Lindsey Graham said. Or are we going to really see our politicians do something? Are they just going to score some cheap partisan points for the election, or are they going to stand for the rule of law finally? As George Will pointed out, it was Nixon who said on the David Frost show, when the president does it, that means it's not illegal. Well, you know, that's what we're seeing all the time from Obama, whether it's Obamacare just being amended at will by our commander, our dictator-in-chief, or whether he's killing American citizens abroad, assassinating them with drones, with secret orders. That's what we see happening. So we're taking your calls on that, but I want to tell you first that this half hour of the Alex Jones Show is brought to you by one of our new products, Survival Shield X2. It's much stronger than regular Survival Shield through a unique manufacturing process that utilizes iodine sources from deep within the earth. And tomorrow, we're going to bring you some pictures of what those look like. It's pretty amazing. It's a unique new process that uses a high purity grade of iodine from more than 7,000 feet below the Earth's surface, below the radiation Fukushima wave. It's extracted from an ancient salt solution that yields a powerful and uncontaminated 650 micrograms of iodine per single drop. It's tested with radiation readings at the labs to ensure freedom from Fukushima radiation. Developed proprietary technology to create nascent iodine by using our key thermodynamic, pressure-sensitive, high-energy sound pulse nano-emulsion technology. And we're going to be at the factory tomorrow to give you a shot of what that mouthful looks like. We should come up with some kind of an acronym for that, you know, just like when they were killing the premature babies, they called it support, you know, but actually this is something that you need to see. This is a great source of a vital nutrient that you need. You can get it at InfoWarsStore.com. The toll-free number for that is 888-253-3139. Again, that's 888-253-3139. 3139. That's Survival Shield X2, our new product here. Now, one of the other things that we hope that you will support us with is Prison Planet TV. We have the nightly news there. We have all of Alex's documentaries going back are available for you to see, as well as up to 10 people that you share your password with if you wish to help wake them up. Now, every night we have great news and special reports from our people. And as one of the callers earlier mentioned, there was a connection between the release of Bergdahl and Michael Hastings, and of course our own Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, who now works on the nightly news, was in the platoon that Michael Hastings was embedded with. He was a commander of that platoon at the Staff Sergeant level and got to know him very well, so he knows a great deal about this Bergdahl situation here. And we got a report that he filed last night. I want you to get his analysis of the comments and the video as they had this prisoner exchange. Here's that report.
And welcome to the Obama distraction. I'm sorry to interrupt your coverage of the VA scandal, but people are starting to get tired of watching the Malaysian flight investigation. So the president's feelings are starting to get a little bit hurt due to the fact that his government-run health care plan is not working out too good. So without further ado, I bring to you the Obama distraction, Bo Bergdahl.
Bergdahl claimed he was nabbed when he fell behind on patrol, but his fellow soldiers say he simply walked off post. The military devoted weeks to searching for him, and now some in his battalion are claiming that at least 6 soldiers were killed during those missions.
All right, we're going to break down the video of the Bo Bergdahl release from the Taliban to American soldiers. As you can see, Bo sitting in the back of the Taliban vehicle. At this point, the Taliban guy's telling him to not come back to Afghanistan. And I don't think he really means just him overall. I think he means it's a message to America, stay out. We don't want you here. Here we are, helicopter coming in, Taliban guys, RPGs on the mountain. But just remember too, though, the government was saying when they found Bergdahl, he was in a very weakened state. Looks to me he's standing up on his own and he is walking away just fine. Notice that pat on the back from this op right here, making sure he doesn't have a vest on or anything like that. All right, he's walking up to the helicopter with these guys. Notice none of these guys are armed. The Taliban had the white flag up. Bo Bergdahl once again gets patted down, checked, make sure he's got no weapons or anything that's threatening, and they're going to put him in the helicopter and fly off.
He was looking for someone who spoke English so he could talk to the Taliban. And when we heard that, it told us, okay, he's actively seeking out the Taliban. Over the next couple months, all the attacks definitely were far more directed. Following his disappearance, IEDs started going off directly under the trucks. They were getting perfect hits every time. Their ambushes were very calculated, very methodical, like they knew what we were going to do.
What you just heard Bo Bergdahl's former team leader say is in fact true. If you go to the wikileaks.org Afghan war files, you can actually read everything that happened that day, where they actually say that they found him actively seeking the Taliban. They heard chatter, and the Kuchi tribe picked him up asking for Taliban who spoke English. I mean, it's all right there. This is a big distraction from the VA, but it is a story worth covering. All right, so if you're tired of the mainstream media mass distraction, make sure you tune into Infowars, and also go to prisonplanet.tv. And don't forget, your username and password can be shared with up to 10
report
people.
from Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, and of course, he was in Afghanistan as well as Iraq, and he knew Michael Hastings very well. He'd been talking about Bergdahl before this ever happened. And of course, Chuck Hagel is putting out the story now that they had to get him because he was in a weakened state. Or Obama said, we saw an opportunity and we seized it. That's why we didn't follow the law. It was an emergency. I don't make any apologies for that. So I don't buy that. I don't know if you do. We've got Michael in FEMA Region number 9. You wanted to talk about this, Michael?
Hey, what's up, man? Let me get you off speaker.
Okay, yeah, please do.
Hey, David.
Hey.
Hey, I got notes taken down. Snowden. Let me ask you a question. What's the medal that's the equivalent of the CMH that they give the civilians?
Well, I don't know. I've never been given a medal by my government. I don't know.
What I believe they should do is Obama should pin that medal on Snowden's chest, and then they should hang Bergdahl, because it's an act of high treason during a time of war, what they call war, and then impeach Obama.
That's right. It is a striking contrast, isn't it, that they would have so many soldiers killed for searching for a deserter, and then at the same time when we have someone reveal criminal actions of our government, that they would come after him and say they want to put him in jail, they want to execute him. There's been a lot of calls even to execute Glenn Greenwald, We've seen over and over again on television. It's like, hey, this journalist, and we've seen Obama prosecute more people under the 1917 Espionage Act than all the other presidents combined. All the other presidents before Obama only invoked that act 4 times, and Obama in just 5 years has done it 7 times against Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists. I mean, he is trying to shut down the press and the public's right to know about anything. But it is a striking contrast, isn't it, the way they have treated this deserter versus somebody who warned us about our government's illegal actions.
I agree with you 100%, David. Try to have one of your guys look up what the name of that medal is that they give to high-end civilians. It's just like the Congressional Medal of Honor, but that's what Snowden should receive. And one other thing I want to say, and I want to say it loud and clear, and I've said it before on the Alex Jones Show, is that I've had friends say, you shouldn't say this online. You shouldn't say this on your Facebook. You shouldn't say this on your cell phone. I hope they're listening to me. That's what I got to say. My name is Michael, FEMA Region 9. Thank you for your time, David Knight.
Well, Michael, you're going to have to watch out for that list when Greenwald eventually releases it. See if your name is on the list of people they've been watching. Of course, they've been watching everybody, but some people they take special interest in here because it's political dissidents that they don't like. It's Tea Party members that they don't like. It's conservatives and libertarians and Ron Paul supporters and Chuck Baldwin supporters that they don't like. And they've made that very clear. And they are training to take over towns under martial law. We see it in their scenarios. We see it in their cities. As I walk through with Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs there in the Asymmetric Warfare Center in Virginia. And as part of that, leading up to that, we went back and looked at their own videos at their conferences where they were talking about this. And I found it very interesting that these people who were talking about the history of asymmetric warfare, what was working for them, what was not, and by the way, they've never won an asymmetric war, and they admitted that. But they also said the legitimacy of a government can be measured by how much security forces they need to use in order to maintain stability. So I would say that by that yardstick, I would say that our own government believes that it is not acting legitimately because they are ramping up the security state in this country like nobody can imagine. Let's go to another caller. Peter in Pennsylvania. You wanted to talk about propaganda. Go ahead, Peter.
Talk to you, David Knight. I got to admit, I like Alex a little better on air because he's a little bit more of a showman than you, but you do a great job anyways.
Thank you.
Anyways, I think you were very courageous with Clive Bundy, and, they race-baited him like they usually do.
Oh, yeah.
So that's just standard operating procedure. The reason I'm calling is, did you happen to catch the Between Two Ferns episode between Obama and Zach Galifianakis? Yeah,
I saw a little bit of that. I couldn't really watch too much of it. I didn't want to. It was making me sick. I didn't. But what do you think about that?
Well, I have a master's degree in psychology, and I study history in my spare time, in particular propaganda, Goebbels, other Soviet propaganda, and Obama and Galifianakis made Goebbels look like an elementary student compared to a guy with a PhD on this video. So basically, I'm writing a script for counter propaganda.
Let me ask you, while we're talking about propaganda, it was just within this last year, I believe, that the government has said that they're going to use Radio Free Europe and Voice of America. They had always used those strictly in foreign countries and communist countries, and it was overt propaganda. Now they say they're going to use those organizations here domestically in the United States. How do you feel about that?
Awful.
They removed the act. That was forbidden when they created them right at the height of the Cold War, right after World War II. They created those two agencies, and they expressly forbade them to do anything in the United States, just as we had after the Church Committee hearings the intelligence community was forbidden to spy on Americans. It was supposed to be only for foreigners that they were going to spy on. But now we see that they're using their spy machine here on Americans and dragnet surveillance. And now we see that they're going to broadcast propaganda to us just like they did in the Cold War, because they know that they're losing the information war, aren't they?
No, they're not. We have people like Alex Jones. We have people like you. We have people like Drudge that they're not going to beat us. How do you fight an idea? Like it was in Ben-Hur with another idea. And I don't want to take much time, but I'll tell you a little bit about the script without giving it away. Essentially, you switch roles. You have a fat, sloppy-looking guy as president, and a real well-reserved, well-spoken, instead of stupid-looking guy interviewing him. And rather than the president dodging the questions with humor, he'd say stuff to Zach Galifianakis like, nobody cares about your text, but he didn't answer the fact that it's illegal for him to read anybody's text messages or emails or phone conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
So with that being said, it ended in the green room, and Obama said, "What's going on? Why are you on the set of my green room?" For my script, it's going to end in Guantanamo with this metaphor of a president being detained for breaking the law. So I'm going to email it to Infowars. If Alex thinks it's a good idea, you guys are more than welcome to shoot it.
Well, thanks. Appreciate that. Let's go to Joseph in Canada. Joseph?
Yes, good day.
Hey.
Talking about the Snowden thing, I guess it's a good thing that, eventually he does try to come out and eventually try to expose these things, but at the same time, you're still left with the real rationalization that there's really nothing that's being done with the information. I mean, we have insurmountable amounts of data that's proven that these people are abusing their positions. They're acting incorrectly. They're performing atrocities that are, costing people's lives. They're acts of treason. They're murdering people. And I think it really is going to take people that are in positions of power to wake up and say, look, we're not going to accept, what you're going to offer us, for some monetary gain for right now.
Well, that's exactly true. The question is, when we expose these things, are we going to just sit there and watch it and say, yeah, that's right, yeah, I know that, and nothing happens, and so we just, as a society, become more cynical, more passive, just accept this and say, well, corruption and illegal activities, that's just the way the government operates? I hope that what's going to happen is eventually, if you remember the Iron Curtain, in East Germany, where they were shooting people going over the border in West Berlin, from East Berlin to West Berlin, one day the soldiers just decided that they weren't going to do that anymore. One day the people got together, they met at a church, they marched up to the borders there where the soldiers were guarding those walls, and the soldiers just stood down because the people were sick and tired of it. Sometimes it takes a very long time for that to happen before the people who are implementing the policies for them essentially just make that ineffective. Now, there's some other tools that we have still in America that we're not using. As I mentioned several times already, jury nullification. There are things that we can do as individuals that are very potent, very powerful ways to shut down this a little bit at a time. We can protest, we can do other things. But the question is, are we going to just become cynical and accepting of this, or are we going to push back against this? And of course, we have, I think, a limited amount of time, because what's going to happen is eventually they're not going to need those soldiers and police officers. They're going to have force multipliers with robotics and with drones, and that's when it gets really dangerous. Will we change before then? We're going to take your comments right after we come back. We're also going to talk about Obama's Cold War. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. This is the one-year anniversary of the beginning of the Snowden document leaks. We've been taking your comments on that, as well as Obama's unilateral dictatorial actions, the latest being the exchange of 5 Taliban for 1 deserter. Do you think that's a good trade? What do you think about the law? Now, we've got an article just went up on Infowars.com from Kurt Nemo. Impeach Obama over the Gitmo release? How about the hypocrisy of Senator Lindsey Graham? And we're going to be talking about that in the next break. But I've got somebody hanging on the phone here to talk to us about banks. And there was an interesting item in the news today. European Central Bank is taking a radical step. This is from the New York Times. In an unprecedented attempt to stimulate the Eurozone economy, the European Central Bank said it will begin charging interest on deposits held by the bank. You understand that? They're going to charge interest on deposits, not on loans, but on deposits. It's called a negative interest rate. And this is something that is coming to us from, guess who? Super Mario. That's Mario Draghi, the guy who was the Goldman Sachs banker who was put in charge of Italy's economy, deposing the duly elected person who was there. He's now currently the European Central Bank president. And they said that imposing a negative deposit rate is meant to give a positive jolt to the Eurozone economy. In the annals of central banking, however, negative deposit rates have rarely been tried. Yeah, that's right. We're going to see what happens. But, hey, it's a sweetheart deal for the bankers, isn't it, if they can charge you to just deposit your money with them, not to loan you money, but to have your money be deposited with them. And, of course, we have the story that's up on Infowars today. It's from Zero Hedge. Financial reporter claims that debt is, quote, the bridge from working hard to playing hard. This is a guy, his name is Steve Leisman, appropriately named. He says, debt is always pointed out as a negative thing, when in fact, debt is the great bridge between working hard and playing hard in this country. This country has been built on consumer debt. No, this country is a house of cards on top of consumer debt that is about to fall down, as well as nationally. And, of course, that's a situation that has been engineered by these central bankers, the ones who are pumping and dumping the mortgage market, pumping and dumping the euro, who engineered, as we pointed out, 59 years ago, according to former chairman of Bilderberg, the Bilderberg Group, they engineered the euro and the Eurozone, the European Union. They did that to take control of those countries, to pump up the assets, then to implode it like a kind of a panic in a bank situation, as we've seen happen with J.P. Morgan, with the founding of the Federal Reserve. They always pump it, they dump it, they buy it up at fire sale prices. One more story about the bankers, and we'll go to Minnesota Polar Bears comments. Hillary Clinton's Goldman Sachs problems. This is from Mother Jones. They point out the hypocrisy of Hillary Clinton complaining about the wealth concentration of the top 0.01%. She says that's risen sharply over the last generation. It's a throwback to the Gilded Age of robber barons. But they say, is this Hillary test driving a theme for a possible 2016 presidential campaign, sticking up for the little guy, trashing the economic elites? She talked about the shadow banking system that operated without accountability, and yet all three Clintons were having a day-long confab with donors to their foundation. And guess where they were meeting? At the Manhattan headquarters of Goldman Sachs. How's that for hypocrisy? She's gotten between, their foundation's got between $250,000 and $500,000 from them just recently, from just Goldman Sachs. So she's going to use some populist rhetoric, just as Obama used rhetoric about being transparent. But we'll see what really happens if she becomes president. Let's hope that that doesn't happen. We're going to be right back after the break. We're going to take calls, and we're going to talk about Obama's EPA coal plant regulations. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we were talking just before the top of the hour about Hillary Clinton's Goldman Sachs problems and, of course, how the bankers engineer the economic disasters of the euro, of the mortgage collapse here in the United States, and how Hillary Clinton is complaining about these economic elites and sounding very populist. At the same time, all three Clintons are meeting at the Goldman Sachs headquarters in Manhattan. Mother Jones pointed out that great hypocrisy and the fact that they have been receiving between $250,000 and $500,000 to their Clinton Foundation. And they ask, can the former Secretary of State cultivate populist credentials while hobnobbing with Goldman Sachs and pocketing money from it and other Wall Street firms? Well, of course she can, because the media is going to cover for her. That's why it is so important for us to have a free press. And one of the things that we can learn, I think, from the Snowden documents is that for the longest time, we had the NSA whistleblowers, as well as everything that we were saying, opposed by the mainstream media. Finally, one paper, The Guardian, takes these documents and people start to pay attention to it. That's great. We're happy to see that happen. We'll take it. Let's hope that something happens in a positive way with that information, that people don't just become cynical and passive. But I wanted to get comments on bankers. Minnesota Polar Bear's been holding on for quite a while. What's your comment?
Yes, sir. How are you doing today, David Knight?
Doing good.
All right, you're doing a fine job being the First Amendment Gunnery Sergeant, Major General.
Thank you.
Okay, do you mind if I notch an arrow and send it across the balls?
Sure, go ahead. What do you want to say about banks? I think you want to talk about banks, right?
Yes, sir, I do. There's going to be a huge Chapter 11 bankruptcy hearing heard in New York. Do you mind if I mention something that would make a fine guest that would be able to explain it for every American citizen to understand the magnitude of this?
Sure, go ahead.
We all can get together. His name is John Morris. His website, if you don't mind me giving it out, is SaveOurFamilySaveOurHome.com. This right here, bankruptcy that will be here or being heard, will be the largest one on the planet. So if they
who's going bankrupt in this bankruptcy hearing?
Okay, this right here, John Morris. You can go back on the Hagman and Hagman report and go back through 2 Fridays and a Tuesday of him explaining it. He's handing out life preservers so where we can all get together and do this to take our country back. Once that right there, Chapter 11 goes through, why do you think that they're training for the takeover of towns? Because once that right there court goes, or that right there Chapter 11 goes through, this puts out a Tunguska event all across the United States, taking away all of our property rights. This is one of the founding things that this right here country was built on.
Oh, without a doubt. That's what they're training for. They're looking for an economic collapse, one that I believe that they're engineering. But that is fundamentally what is at the bottom of this, is that they want to own everything. They want this kind of feudalistic society where there's no middle class, where everything is owned by the banks. We've seen this happening for a long time. The International Monetary Fund under Robert McNamara, everybody can criticize them for what they called rent seeking. They would go into third world countries. They would extend massive amounts of loans to them, not even for things like infrastructure, but just things for like social welfare programs, things that were essentially consumer items. They weren't building any kind of income production. And so they gave them these loans. They gave them massive interest rates and massive amounts of loans, bankrupted those countries, and then went in and seized assets. That has been their game plan. It's always been their game plan. That's essentially the way they created the Federal Reserve. I believe that's exactly what they're doing, and they are training our soldiers, they're training our police for martial law. We've seen it any number of ways, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to take title of this stuff, and they're going to do it by force if necessary. We'll be right back taking your calls. It's not just there. You know, with that, we have people like Jonathan Turley saying that Obama is the president that Richard Nixon always wished he could be. We've got George Will on the right saying recalling that Nixon said when the president does it, that means that it's not illegal. Doesn't that sound exactly like Obama? Now, there's also many other places where he does what he wishes, where he changes Obamacare, or where he shuts down coal plants. He said when he was running for election the first time, he said, you know, you can open a coal plant, but it's going to bankrupt you. Why? Because he's going to, by fiat, shut down our energy sources. And this is a story from the New American. Obama's EPA coal plant regulations are, quote, Obamacare for the atmosphere. Now, that's not the New American saying that. That's actually somebody who's an Obama supporter. See, they cheer him on in these dictatorial pronouncements that he has. This is that's a quote from Jason Marks, the Daily Beast. He said, you can think of the power plant rules as Obamacare for the atmosphere. Numbingly complex in an effort to ensure flexibility and fairness, based on a market system likely to transform a key sector of the economy for decades to come. I mean, does that sound like an endorsement? I mean, this guy likes it. He says it's numbingly complex. Of course, it's going to be flexible and fair. I don't really know how it's fair to increase our power bills by 100% or 200%. I don't know how flexible they are on these rules. I think they're pretty inflexible. Based on a market system, there's no market system here. And likely to transform a key sector of the economy for decades to come. Yeah, I would say that's true. You know, I want to go back and look at one of the earliest nightly news reports that we had from Alex Jones. This goes back to August of 2011. And he was talking about Obama's energy policies then. Let's see how much has changed.
Obama hit struggling Americans with energy rate hikes. Following Barack Obama's vow to bankrupt the coal power industry, Americans are set to be hit with a wave of utility bill hikes as draconian EPA regulations drive up the cost of energy.
So if somebody wants to build a coal power plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
The Obama administration's crusade against coal-fired power plants, which was launched on the back of discredited junk science about hyped global warming threats, has little to do with improving the environment and everything to do with lowering living standards by creating artificial scarcity. The EPA has now listed as harmful carbon dioxide that is part of the life cycle of the planet. New EPA rules dictate that utility companies will be forced to spend an initial outlay of $800 million to conform with regulations that mandate harmful emissions be reduced under the Clean Air Act. And yet power plants supplied by General Electric, one of Barack Obama's biggest campaign contributors, have received an EPA waiver and will not be subject to the new regulations. The new rules will exacerbate the problem of rolling blackouts, warns Donna Nelson, head of the Texas Public Utility Commission. Nelson said, quote, "I have no doubt in my mind that this rule will result in reliability issues and rolling outages in Texas." Obama's strict enforcement of draconian EPA regulations has led to new clean-burning coal-fired plants being mothballed and other existing ones being shut down, which has in turn led to Texas and other states becoming energy dependent. All of this, of course, will lead to significantly higher utility bills for U.S. citizens who are being assaulted with more and more expenses, even as the threat of a double-dip recession lowers living standards.
There you go. That's a report from 3 years ago. Now, not much has changed, has it? We still see Obama's war on coal-fired plants. We also see that just as he did, it's an apt analogy, isn't it, when the Daily Beast says it's Obamacare for the atmosphere, because just as Alex Jones reported 3 years ago, he was giving his corporate buddies, his crony capitalist friends, waivers from these regulations. Just as he gave people that he wanted, the corporations that he liked, he gave them waivers from Obamacare, arbitrarily moving the deadlines around to make sure that the voters didn't make the connections before the elections, but after the elections. Now, in this story from the New American, written by William Jasper, they point out again, this. Let me read this quote one more time to you. This is from the Daily Beast. They said it's Obamacare for the atmosphere. Numbingly complex, but still flexible and fair, based on a market system and likely to transform a key sector of the economy for decades to come. Exactly. You know what? There is nothing that affects not only your prosperity, but your standard of living and even the length of your life than cheap, available energy. Now, as he points out in this article in the New American, he says, is it based on a market system? This is what he says: perhaps a fascist corporate state market system in which politically connected companies reap huge cap-and-trade profits. Certainly not a free market system. For the longest time, the globalists have been looking to replace their central banking fiat currency schemes, their national debt schemes. They've been looking to replace that with some kind of an energy scheme, some way where we have to pay them, not for the privilege of having money in circulation. You know, we pay debt to our privately owned Federal Reserve System, which cannot even be audited by our own elected representatives. They're immune from even having the books open. We've been paying them for the privilege of printing money. Now we're going to pay another private cartel, global cartel. We're going to now pay them an indulgence to be able to use energy. They call it a global carbon tax. And, you know, even the people who believe that we have global warming, I'm a skeptic of that. We see that the data does not prove that. We see that their models say that as CO2 was to rise, that we would have a commensurate rise in global temperatures. That hasn't happened. We've seen the CO2 rise. We've seen that the temperatures have not risen. And so their model is broken. But even those people, many environmentalists who believe that there is man-made global warming and that it is due to carbon dioxide, even those people don't see as any kind of a solution sending all of your money to Al Gore anytime you use a little bit of energy. That's not a solution. That's feudalism. It's not environmentalism. It's feudalism on steroids. It's worse than the central banks. You know, they're trying to support this. Even the EPA has become, well, even the EPA, of course the EPA. The EPA has become the biggest cheerleader for this. Says, learn about carbon pollution from power plants. They have a page on their website where they're talking about rising global temperatures. Isn't happening. Rising sea level. Isn't happening. Changes in weather and precipitation patterns. That isn't really happening either. Changes in ecosystems, habitats, and species diversity. Look, weather is always in a state of flux. It is always changing. But if you look at the long-term trends, it doesn't support their data. Even Canada is cracking down and telling the weathermen not to talk about climate change. We saw this at the American Meteorological Association in Austin last year. We saw the weathermen were actually doing real science. They had real models. They were trying to predict things a couple of days in advance. But the climate scientists predicting things out decades away, centuries away. Their models can't be tested. They're baloney. We're going to be right back taking your calls. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. I'm just looking at the Drudge Report, and he's got an article up here. A poll says that Obama is less competent than Bush. That's what the American people think. Well, that's getting down there, isn't it? That's getting really low. Where is that on the Jimmy Carter scale? I don't know, but it's getting really bad. We've been taking your calls on the one-year anniversary of the Snowden documents. What do you think that means? Is he a traitor or is he a hero? And how are we going to rein our government in to obey the law? Because in my opinion, I think what he did was he exposed, like many whistleblowers frequently take a rap for, he exposed criminal actions by our government. He didn't give away any secrets that other spy agencies didn't already know about, that terrorists didn't know about. What he did was he showed the American people that they are the targets of their own government. He's exposed a secret shadow government that is operating outside of the law, unaccountable to the law. And we see that being done openly by Obama. Let's take some of your comments. Michael in Oregon. Michael?
Hey, David, I had two things to say. One, I think you are a great host. I mean, Alex is Alex, and you are you, and you do a great job, and I think you do awesome, so I wanted to say that. And secondly, I just wanted to give you guys a follow-up. Last week, I did call Greg Walden and Ron Wyden, my two senators in Oregon, told them, you know, I was complaining about Bilderberg and the Logan Act, and, you know, you guys have a duty to do something about it, and their flunky people just said, well, I'll pass on the message. Ed Blumenauer, his office actually told me this, and I'm quoting, the government can do whatever we want to do, close quote, and then hung up on me. And he's a representative, and I find that very disconcerting. And I just wanted you to know, it's crazy that they don't care what we say.
Well, there you go. And give everybody in Washington his name again.
There's Ed Blumenauer. He's the representative that just does not care. And then there is Greg Walden and Ron Wyden, and they just don't. Just don't seem to care. It's always, I'll pass on the message. It's like, well, I don't want you to pass on the message. I want a response.
That's right.
They don't care.
That's right. Yeah, they won't respond to you. But it is still important to call them up about that response that we're the government and we'll do whatever we want to. Isn't that the message that we've gotten over this, over the Snowden leaks? Absolutely unrepentant about any of their criminal actions being exposed. Like I mentioned before, when we were abroad, when we were in Copenhagen reporting on Bilderberg, seeing this story out of the UK that some whistleblower had reported this atrocious treatment of children and seniors, and yet the response was not to do anything, not to correct that, but to fire that guy. I mean, that's what we expect from them, actually. You know, again, it's that quote that Richard Nixon said, when the president does it, that means it isn't illegal. And that's what they're saying. We're the government. We can do whatever we wish. That's very sad. Thank you for letting us know that. Let's go to Stephen in Arizona. You wanted to talk about the NSA? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, he's no longer with us. How about Darcy in Canada? Darcy.
Hello, David.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Hi, David. I wanted to talk quickly about, well, with regard to the Snowden leaks, if they are or were orchestrated through government channels, the chilling effect is real. Because I tell you, even getting the nerve to call in to Infowars, I've been a listener for about 6 years, and I've wanted to call in. It's difficult to get up that nerve, and it's through knowing and reading these NSA documents that were leaked by Snowden that it actually accentuates that nervousness, that chilling effect. So on that note, I've got a couple things that I want to mention I thought were important, ways that we can keep our communications the lines open, and it involves something called PSK31, and what it is a digital mode over shortwave radio. And you can actually send out reports that operate much like a chat room. You can dial into a small area of bandwidth between 2 and 30 megahertz on the shortwave band, and it really is an effective way to keep your communications up. The other, is to look at things such as Debian Linux. You're able to encrypt a hard drive. With 256-bit encryption, which allows you to it doesn't mean that your data is going to be protected, but in my case, I'm running a dual-booted Linux and Windows.
Hang on, we got to go to a break, but I want to get some more information from you for the audience about PSK31. You said it's a digital mode over shortwave. I want to get that unpacked a little bit for the audience, because that's what some of the people today are doing, celebrating the one-year anniversary of the Snowden documents. They're saying, reset the net. We need to take some individual action for our own privacy as we act collectively. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight here as your host, and I just had John Bound come in and give me a message from Leanne McAdoo. She told me that actually Snowden did give information to the enemy. The enemy, of course, from the government's perspective, is the American people. So I stand corrected. I think that's absolutely true. Perfect. Now, I've got on the phone, and hang on for just a little bit longer, if you will, Darcy from Canada. He was giving us some information about things that people could do, things that you can do to maintain your privacy. And I think we all need to do that as a way to just resist this illegal tyranny that's being put on us, that we've been made aware of with the Ed Snowden leaks. It's essentially become widespread knowledge now. We were telling you about it for a very long time. Alex was telling you that they're spying on you, that they're watching you through your monitors, that they're recording everything that you're saying, and David Petraeus told us well before the leaks that they were going to use your appliances, what they call the Internet of Things. They were going to use that to spy on you. You think you've got automated house controls. Well, that's one level. That's the most obvious level. That's what you're using it for. They're using it for something completely different, just like they use your iPhone, just like they laugh at the American public that we queue up in lines in order to buy our 1984 devices. They laughed about that in slides that were part of the Snowden leak. So it's a lot of very valuable information. What are we going to do with it? We can't get the NSA to stop doing it. We can't get our senators to do anything about it. But there are some steps that we can take individually. And I want to talk to Darcy from Canada about PSK31. Before we do, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. This half hour of the Alex Jones Show is brought to you by Super Female Vitality. If you've tried Super Male Vitality, you've heard what it does for men. Super Female Vitality brings these benefits to women to an even greater degree. You know, women are under attack by artificial estrogen chemicals, even more so than men. And this hormone imbalance leads to weight gain as well as depression. So it's a great product that you can use. Try that. It helps to support our operation as well as Survival Shield X2. And we're going to have a very special report tomorrow. We're going to show you these crystals, these iodine crystals that are harvested at more than 7,000 feet below the earth, below the Fukushima ground effects. We test them for radiation. We're going to show you those crystals as well as the factory. There's going to be a tour of that tomorrow, some of the information we're going to have on the show tomorrow. Don't miss it. That's going to be fascinating. But Survival Shield X2 available now at InfoWarsStore.com. It's a way that you can support our operation here. We're not funded by the government. We're funded by offering you products that help you as well as help us. It's a win-win situation. Now, I want to go back to Darcy in Canada. Darcy, you were telling us about PSK31. You said it was a digital mode operating over shortwave. Explain that to us a little bit. Do you need special hardware, or is it besides your shortwave radio?
If you're operating with there's a few portable shortwave radio models that work quite well with that. Like ICOM has one. Yaesu, I think, is another manufacturer. But there's a Rig Blaster device. It's a small $100 unit that interfaces through USB to your sound card between the radio, and it'll actually do the phase shift keying for your handset.
Okay.
And it'll allow you to operate in the digital mode. Basically, you type in your what you want to send out, and it does all the translation, almost like a teletype in a way. And actually, beyond PSK31, there's other modes that like Q15X25, and you can do a quick search on these on Wikipedia.
Right, yeah, we don't want to get too technical on it because people are listening on the radio. But it's important for people to know that there are ways that they can get on the Internet that circumvent these pipes. And that's something, thank you, Darcy in Canada, that's something that's very important because we're seeing an all-out threat against the Internet. This month's Infowars magazine talks about the death of the Internet. Take a picture of this, guys, this magazine here. Death of the Internet. And that's our magazine this month. Alex created the magazine as another way, an alternative way to get information out there in case they do shut the Internet down. And, of course, we've been talking all week about free speech. We've been talking about how governments can effectively shut down any discussion of things like Bilderberg, pretend that it doesn't exist, just as the Chinese government pretended that the Tiananmen Square massacre didn't exist. Now, 25 years later, you've got a generation of people that have never even heard of it. When they were shown a picture of the famous Tank Man, they said, is that a parade? Is that your artwork? What is that? They had no idea what that was about. So governments and government-controlled press, and make no mistake about it, we have that here in this country, can very effectively shut down information to the public just by pretending that it doesn't exist, just by ridiculing as a conspiracy theory any information that people might get out about something that they're not reporting on. For years, for decades, we had television dominated by only 3 stations, 3 networks, major networks, and they were essentially on the same page. So if these guys didn't talk about it, then, and you heard some information from somebody else, clearly that wasn't true because they were all reading off of the same script. It was only when the Fairness Doctrine, which hadn't been imposed by the FCC, it was only when the Fairness Doctrine was taken away in the Reagan administration that we had the rise of talk radio, and people heard a different voice. They heard an independent voice. Then after that, we had the rise of the Internet, and they got even more of that. Now they're trying to shut that down. They're not only talking about shutting down the Fairness Doctrine, but they're also working in many different ways to shut down the Internet. That's what this magazine is about, the death of the Internet, the many ways that they can do that. And the reason I had Darcy from Canada talk about the way that you can get digital signals over a shortwave radio, and you can Google that yourself and see how to do that. The reason I had him talk about that a little bit more in detail is because what we can see, what may happen with the FCC now is with the net neutrality regulations, once they allow certain megacorporations to have much, much faster internet than other people, that's going to be tantamount to effectively shutting down these alternative media outlets. It's going to make it difficult for us to compete. It's going to make it impossible for many of you out there who are independent Paul Reveres, independent bloggers. It's going to make it difficult, if not impossible, for you to get your information out there because people are going to get accustomed to high-speed internet. Who can stand going back to, let's say, dial-up speed if you're accustomed to broadband? You are not going to want to browse those sites that are incredibly slow. They're going to look like they're frozen. They're going to look like they're not working. This is being driven by Comcast and Verizon and the people who are running the infrastructure of the internet. They're the ones controlling the pipes. They want this. The people don't want it. And in most cases, the internet provider, the content providers, people like Google and others even oppose this. There was an interesting thing that happened yesterday. There was a comedian, John Oliver. He went on a net neutrality rant. He had about a 13-minute skit talking about net neutrality. And he said, the most dangerous thing is that the government can do the worst things to us and get away with it because they make it boring and they make it technical. And so what he did was he worked against that. Let's play a little bit of a clip of that. We can't play too much of it because it's like 13 minutes long, but let's play a little bit of that right now to give people a sample of that.
Is so egregious, activists and corporations have been forced onto the same side. That's basically Lex Luthor knocking on Superman's apartment door and going, listen, I know we have our differences, but we have got to get rid of that arsehole in apartment 3B.
Exactly, and that we have our disagreements. I have disagreements with John Oliver on many issues, but we need to all come together, and we need to push back against the police state. We need to push back against the loss of free speech. And they can take our free speech any number of ways. We've seen with SOPA, CISPA, ACTA, PIPA, we had to defeat CISPA twice. And now it's coming at us through these trade partnerships, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Partnership. They're trying to bring these same control techniques in through the back door. So, yes, we have very important differences on certain things, but just like Superman and Lex Luthor, we need to come together and we need to stop the police state. We need to stop Big Brother, the surveillance state. We need to work together on this, and we need to me, that's one of the most important things about the Snowden leaks. And I think it's a real litmus test to see who the real people are, the people that are controlled, the people who want to control everything about our society, the people who are really the authoritarians in society, the people who want a militarized police and use the police in a militarized way, to use the military as police. We need to root out the people who are going to take away our court systems, who are going to impose this kind of surveillance on us at the same time that they censor our free speech. Let's go to some of your calls and comments. Let's, Cindy in FEMA Region 3. You had something you wanted to say about the Bergdahl incident. Cindy?
Yeah, hi, David. You're a good man.
Thank you.
To back up 1 second, the man who called in from Oregon, he was saying about his representative.
Yes.
We have the same thing over here. Senator Pat Toomey, he was a Tea Party candidate, and when he got in there, he turned coats so fast. I emailed his office, called his office, and said they needed to get rid of the Patriot Act. And he was like, oh, no, we have to have the Patriot Act.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and this is Toomey. It just blew me away. I just want to recall all of them.
Yes.
And that's this Bladall guy.
And let me interject there, too. That's what I was just saying, is that, you know, there are some real differences between Pat Toomey and some of the Democrats. But when we get to the point where we're going to allow the government unrestrained police powers, where we're going to lose our basic freedoms, we're going to lose our due process, where they're going to be able to do anything to us, violate any law with immunity, where everything is secret, there is no transparency, that's where the left and the right need to come together, just like he's talking about, joking about Superman and Lex Luthor coming together. We need to make some common cause on these basic things, shut that down, and then we can talk about some other very important issues. But if we don't have the freedom of speech, if we don't have privacy, if we live under a police state, then we're not going to have any of these other freedoms either. Sorry, go ahead. I just...
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
They know that too. It's just playing one hand against the other, Democrat against Republican. Whatever I see, Democrats and Republicans is all the same.
Oh yeah.
You know, I think it's time for a third party, really, because they're all the same.
On those core issues, they are the same. Did you have a comment about Bergdahl?
Yeah, I don't trust that guy. And what Obama did when he said we don't leave any of our young men behind, who's he kidding? What about this Marine in Mexico? I find him more important. Why don't we threaten Mexico instead of giving up 5 terrorists? Why don't we say, well, we're going to give you 30,000 of your felons back, rapists, murderers, whatever. We'll send them back to Mexico. We want our Marine, our real soldier.
Yeah, it's amazing what's happened here, and as previous callers pointed out, it's a real striking contrast to see the way they have talked about Snowden and the way they've talked about Bergdahl. I think it's pretty telling. Thank you so much, Cindy. Let's go to Jason in FEMA Region 10. You wanted to talk about Snowden documents. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, David.
Hey.
Hey, I don't think Edward Snowden is a traitor, but I don't necessarily think he's a hero either. I feel that he should have stayed around in the U.S. of A. if he wanted to really, if he really wanted to stand his ground and make a message here, you know, and be a martyr for a greater cause. I just think he was kind of a coward for running away.
Well, you know, we can all second guess what he did. I mean, I've even, you know, who knows? I'm grateful that the information has come out, even if it was, as some people have even criticized him as deliberately putting that out as being a shill. But I'm glad that it's out there. I think people needed to see that. It has woken people up in a way that, frankly, they were not aware of before. If they ever even heard that, because the mainstream media was not talking about what the NSA was doing, if they even heard the stories about the whistleblowers from the NSA, like William Binney, they would dismiss it as not important, or they wouldn't really pay any attention to it. So for whatever reason, these documents have basically put it front and center on people. And now the question is, what are we as the American people going to do about it? I think that's really the question. What do you think we should do about it?
Absolutely. I feel that we should have more whistleblowers come out and, you know, expose what's going on in this country, because there's a lot of shadow business happening, and it's really up to us as people to come together and no longer be the divided states of America. You know, we got to be united.
Yeah, you never know what these people are capable of doing. And so, you know, even though he didn't stay in America and do it, that doesn't mean that he wasn't aware that there was a great deal of risk to him. I mean, look at their reach is pretty strong. Look at, they got Julian Assange. He's holed up in an embassy in London. And so, you know, that's always a risky thing. I'm glad that he exposed it, and just hope that we can do something with it. Let's go to Jake in Idaho. Jake?
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to add on to what that gentleman was saying about the Chapter 11 bankruptcy. You had asked what it was, and I feel like this issue is it's an issue that they're finding is going to affect, you know, 90% of financed properties. And speaking of convoluted and all that you were talking about, what it does is your mortgage has been sold off many times through companies that are hydras of the federal government, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And when you think you've made your last payment and you actually hold your title, your mortgage title is, the chain of custody has been broken along the way, and it will revert back to the back to those government agencies that, you know, they will in essence own your land. And
well, they've created a real mess, that's for sure. The way that I've heard it explained is that, you know, when they started securitizing these loans, what they essentially did was kind of like putting all the mortgages into the mortgage documents into a blender and chopping them up and then pouring a little bit of it out over here and a little bit out of it out over there, essentially destroying them and losing, as you point out, a chain of custody. Now, we had a guest on here at Infowars. He's gone out as a consultant to a lot of county governments because, frankly, the county governments get a lot of their revenue to support them from recording the mortgage deeds. And always in the past, what would happen is, as a mortgage was sold, it would be recorded locally. They would pay the taxes for that. There would be a very clearly documented chain of who owns what. That's been taken away. They've lost that revenue. Some of them are very angry about that and trying to stop that. So it's a real mess. Beyond that, we have derivatives that are tens of trillions of dollars that are out there that these bankers want to put sovereign governments on the hook to guarantee for them so they can then come back and claim that the governments have to bail them out. That's the game, the pump and dump game. We're going to be right back with your calls. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight taking your calls in this final segment. We were talking earlier in the program about David Letterman having CNN's Anderson Cooper on. David Letterman was demanding gun control, attacking the Second Amendment. Kit Daniels just put an article up summarizing that. He has a great quote in here. He says, compare the panel at last year's South by Southwest. He says, compare that to a grassroots open carry rally that also occurred during South by Southwest, had over 100 gun owners on a weekday. And he pointed out that the panel that was set up by Bloomberg didn't attract more than just a handful of people, probably less than, I would say less than a dozen from the pictures that I saw. You know, kind of like David Letterman's audience is what I would say. It was a very, very small number of people. There's really not a constituency out there for blaming reasonable people for the irrational acts of one individual. And as we've learned this week, Elliot Rogers, the guy who went around killing women, posting his suicide note and attacking them. Of course, you know, he stabbed people as well as shooting them. They're not calling for knife control. But the real thing that needs to be controlled are these pharmaceutical drugs that are widely prescribed for people. But, of course, nothing is being said about that because they sponsor programs like the David Letterman program. They are the major sponsors of most of the networks. Bob in Texas said that he wanted to make a comment about the NSA and the Second Amendment. Bob?
Yes, David, how are you today?
Doing good.
Great. Listen, Alex was talking about the Second Amendment the other day and all the gun control they're trying to get into place. And, David, I'm someone that doesn't own a gun. Mm-hmm. I've never owned a gun all my life. See no real reason to go and own one, but always want to know that if I want to, I want to go get one. There are people that do not own guns that also benefit from the fact that guns are legal and available. If they're legal and available in your area, you keep criminals guessing. They don't know whether you have a gun or not, but if you are lawfully able to have a gun, you very well could have one in your house. And that in itself is a deterrent.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And we see that reflected in the statistics. And I've had several interviews with a former prosecutor in Chicago's Cook County, Jim Gierach. He's now with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Their website is leap.cc. Former law enforcement officials, former prosecutors who are against the war on drugs. And as he's pointed out, in Chicago, he knows from decades as a prosecutor there that 80% of the shootings there in Chicago are a function of the failed war on drugs. It isn't the fact that gun control, that gun ownership is allowed there. They hassle gun owners there like nowhere else. And so the people who are armed are typically the drug dealers. And as we see, as we saw during alcohol prohibition, it's the rival drug gangs that are shooting each other in the street. That's really the source of it. It's not the legal gun owners. We've seen many, many cases where they can stop an attack because, of course, even the best police can't be there. We've seen the police chief of Detroit tell us that. He says he wants his people in his jurisdiction to have their own firearms because he said no matter how hard they try, they can't be there when a crime is being committed. We saw a mother defend her family from a home break-in using a weapon in Detroit. Now, the police subsequently caught the intruders, but she scared them off with some gunshots. If she hadn't had a gun, they would have broken in. Who knows what they would have done to her family. And the police chief there fortunately learned his lesson. He had been a policeman in California where he believed in gun control. Then he went to Maine and he started realizing, hey, these people out in these rural areas, they're very heavily, a large percentage of the population owns firearms, and look at how low the crime is. And so he took that message with him to Detroit, and it's been people like him People like Jim Gierach with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, they're the ones who really understand what's going on. David Letterman is just looking for badly desired attention. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Join us then.